As Emily's distress deepens, her once bright spirit now a shadow of its former self, her teacher Mrs. Eunice notices the alarming change and takes a courageous step to intervene. In a pivotal moment of vulnerability, Emily finally confronts her hidden trauma in a safe space, revealing the profound impact of the unsettling event with Mr. Uche. The emotional struggle of Emily's silent battle comes to light, setting the stage for a transformative journey toward healing and understanding. Miss Emily, a vibrant 12-year-old, reveled in the magic of summer in Lagos. The city pulsed with life, colorful markets, and festivals filled with rhythm and cheer, and the warm, sandy beaches. Emily's summer days were a joyful mosaic of laughter with friends, indulging in her family's spicy jollof rice, and exploring every hidden corner of the sunlit shore. This particular evening felt different. Her parents had invited Mr. Uche, her longtime family friend, for dinner. Mr. Uche, known for his captivating stories and exotic treats from his travels, always brought an air of excitement to Emily's life. But tonight, a peculiar undercurrent stirred beneath his usual charm. As she helped her mother set the table, a fleeting sense of unease settled over her, like a whisper of a storm on the horizon. As dusk enveloped the living room, painting the space in long, eerie shadows, Emily's parents excused themselves to the kitchen to clean up. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Alone with Mr. Uche, Emily's pulse quickened. Despite her efforts to shrug off her discomfort as mere tiredness, an unsettling feeling gnawed at her. Mr. Uche's demeanor had subtly shifted, his smile, usually warm, now seemed to carry an unfamiliar weight. His gaze lingered too long, his laughter felt too close. Emily's attempts to focus on her thoughts and ignore the creeping anxiety were futile. As she glanced around the room, trying to stay calm, she had no inkling that this evening would forever alter the course of her life. As the evening darkened, Mr. Uche's behavior took a sinister turn. What had begun as casual conversation and shared laughter slowly morphed into something far more disturbing. His movements grew increasingly intrusive, his voice soft and unsettling. Emily's heart raced as he encroached on her personal space, his eyes glinting with a predatory intensity. It was as if the warm, friendly veneer he had always presented had cracked, revealing something profoundly menacing beneath. Emily's instincts screamed at her to run, but she felt paralyzed, trapped in a surreal nightmare where every attempt to escape was thwarted by her own fear. Her breaths came in shallow, ragged gusts as she struggled to comprehend what was happening. Mr. Uche's hands grazed her skin with an unsettling familiarity, sending chills through her as Mr. Uche found his way to her. Emily's mind was a maelstrom of panic and confusion, a fog of disbelief settling over her as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Is this a rape? Or a violation of my privacy? Still battling with her thought in disbelief of what had just happened to her. When her parents finally returned to the room, Emily's relief was palpable but short-lived. She forced a smile, her body trembling beneath the facade of calm she tried to project. The facade of normalcy felt like a fragile shell, barely holding together as her heart pounded in her chest. She could barely focus on the conversation, her thoughts racing through a tumultuous storm of fear and self-doubt. The evening ended with Mr. Uche's departure, leaving behind a heavy silence that seemed to echo Emily's inner turmoil. As she lay in bed, the darkness of the room mirrored the darkness in her mind. The incident left a profound scar, a deep sadness intertwining with a gnawing fear that left Emily feeling isolated and unsure how to confront the overwhelming storm of emotions that threatened to consume her. The days following that fateful night wrapped Emily in a shroud of darkness, suffocating her once vibrant spirit. Each morning began with a crushing weight of dread, her once joyful demeanor eroded by a sense of pervasive shame and confusion. The incident with Mr. Uche was a shadow that loomed over her every waking moment, seeping into her thoughts and dreams. Emily grappled with a torrent of emotions she couldn't name. Why had this happened to her? Why did she feel so afraid and dirty, as though the world had been tainted by Mr. Uche's betrayal? At school, Emily's previously radiant smile had vanished. Her laughter, once a bright melody in the classroom, was now conspicuously absent. She withdrew from her friends, avoiding their company and the once beloved games at the park. Even her favorite subjects seemed to lose their allure, replaced by a pervasive numbness that clouded her every thought. Emily's parents, deeply concerned, noticed the change but were powerless to penetrate the barrier Emily had erected around herself. Her eyes, once sparkling with curiosity and joy, now appeared hollow and distant. They tried to engage her, offering comfort and trying to rekindle her interest in activities she once loved, but their efforts felt futile, like grasping at shadows. Emily felt trapped in a world of her own making, a silent prison built from her inability to voice the horror she had experienced. Each day was a battle against the crushing weight of secrecy and guilt. The more she retreated into her shell, the deeper the chasm between her and her family grew, leaving her isolated and lost in a labyrinth of her own emotions, unable to find a way out. Emily's transformation from a vivacious, spirited child to a shadow of her former self did not go unnoticed. Her teacher, Mrs. Eunice, a woman of deep empathy and sharp perception, saw the subtle yet profound changes in Emily's demeanor. Mrs. Eunice had encountered many students facing unseen battles, but Emily's sudden shift was particularly alarming. The once enthusiastic student who would eagerly participate in class discussions was now a ghostly presence, her eyes vacant and her responses cut. One day, after noticing Emily's withdrawal in class, Mrs. Eunice gently approached her during recess. The playground buzzed with the cheerful noise of other children, but for Emily, it felt like an alien world. As Mrs. Eunice's kind eyes met hers, Emily's heart pounded erratically, a tempest of emotions swirling within her. She could feel the weight of her secret pressing against her chest, and the words she longed to say seemed trapped behind an invisible barrier. Her voice trembled as she tried to articulate her feelings, but the storm inside her was too overwhelming. The more Mrs. Eunice probed gently, the more Emily's emotions surged uncontrollably. Her attempts to speak only resulted in tears, making her feel even more helpless and isolated. The fear of not being believed or understood tightened its grip around her throat. At home, the situation was no better. Emily's grades plummeted, and her once vibrant interests, reading, drawing, and playing with friends, faded into distant memories. Her parents, anxious and bewildered, struggled to penetrate the growing chasm between them and their daughter. Their attempts to rekindle her old passions or engage her in conversation seemed futile, only deepening the sense of estrangement. Emily felt herself slipping further away from the only world she had known, caught in an emotional riptide that threatened to pull her under completely. One overcast afternoon, Mrs. Eunice, deeply troubled by Emily's drastic change, decided to take a bold step. She waited until the school day ended and approached Emily's parents with a heavy heart. Their daughter's sudden withdrawal had become increasingly alarming, and Mrs. Eunice could no longer remain a passive observer. In the quiet, formal setting of the school's principal's office, Mrs. Eunice shared her observations with Emily's parents. Her voice was steady but laced with concern as she described Emily's shift from a lively student to a distant, sullen child. Mrs. Eunice suggested that Emily might benefit from speaking with a professional, a counselor who could help her navigate the emotional storm she was clearly facing. Emily's parents listened intently, their faces etched with a mixture of confusion and worry. Though hesitant and unsure, they knew they had to act to support their daughter. The following week, Emily's parents arranged a meeting with Dr. Adodo, a renowned child psychologist specializing in trauma. Dr. Adodo's office was a heaven of calm, decorated in soothing colors and gentle artwork that aimed to comfort. Upon entering, Emily was immediately struck by the warmth of the space, the stark contrast to the turmoil she felt inside. Dr. Adodo greeted Emily with a serene, empathetic presence, making a conscious effort to bridge the gap between her professional demeanor and the emotional vulnerability of her young patient. Emily's initial anxiety was palpable. She clung to her parents, her knuckles white as she gripped their hands. Dr. Adodo, sensing her apprehension, spoke softly, offering gentle reassurances and allowing Emily to acclimate at her own pace. Gradually, the compassionate atmosphere began to ease Emily's fears, creating a fragile but hopeful space where she might eventually find the courage to voice her hidden pain. Dr. Adodo's office was filled with a calming aura that starkly contrasted the storm inside Emily's mind. Seated in plush chairs surrounded by soft hues and gentle lighting, Emily and her parents listened intently as Dr. Adodo began to unravel the complexities of trauma. Her voice was soothing yet authoritative, and she reassured them that feeling scared and confused was a natural response to what Emily had endured. It was a glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak landscape, a promise that they were not alone in this fight. Emily's parents were visibly relieved, yet a note of anxiety remained. They were eager to support Emily but felt unsure of how best to navigate this new terrain. Dr. Adodo suggested that Emily start attending weekly therapy sessions, an idea that was met with cautious optimism. It was a daunting step, but they were ready to support their daughter in any way they could. The first session was fraught with tension. Emily walked into Dr. Adodo's office with her heart pounding and her palms sweating. The room, designed to comfort, felt like an alien landscape. Dr. Adodo greeted her with a gentle smile, guiding her to a cozy, inviting space where she could begin to unburden herself. Emily's initial attempts to speak were stifled by a choking mixture of fear and shame. Her voice barely rose above a whisper, then her eyes darted nervously around the room. As the weeks progressed, each session became a fragile exploration of Emily's buried emotions. Dr. Adodo introduced her to various techniques, drawing, storytelling, and gentle questioning, to help her articulate her feelings. Each tiny revelation was a glimmer of light piercing through the dense fog of her trauma. Though progress was slow and fraught with setbacks, Emily began to experience fleeting moments of clarity and hope. With each session, she took another tentative step towards the possibility of healing, feeling as if she were reclaiming pieces of herself that had been lost in the darkness. Each therapy session felt like a daunting battle for Emily. The supportive environment Dr. Adodo had crafted was a sanctuary, but Emily was entangled in her own internal conflict, struggling to articulate the horror that haunted her. Talking about her experiences felt akin to swimming through thick, viscous mud, each word she tried to express a laborious effort. The emotional weight was crushing, and her throat tightened with each attempt to vocalize the trauma that clung to her like an oppressive fog. Every time she began to speak, a churning mixture of fear and relief battled within her. The fear of reliving the trauma, of exposing herself to vulnerability, was overwhelming. But there was also a flicker of relief, the hope that speaking might eventually lead to understanding and healing. Emily's voice would falter, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for a way out. Her attempts to speak were frequently interrupted by choked sobs and stifled cries, each session feeling like an emotional marathon. Dr. Adodo, ever patient and attuned to Emily's struggle, gently encouraged her to move at her own pace. She introduced creative techniques such as drawing and storytelling, aiming to bypass the barriers of Emily's verbal expression. The therapist encouraged Emily to create visual representations of her feelings, using colors and shapes to express the inexpressible. Storytelling exercises allowed Emily to externalize her emotions through fictional narratives, providing a buffer between her pain and her need to communicate. Though the progress was painstakingly slow, each small breakthrough, each drawing, each story, there was a small victory. Emily began to feel incremental relief as she started to untangle her emotions, gaining a nascent sense of understanding. The therapeutic journey, though fraught with struggle, was slowly illuminating pathways to healing. The process was agonizingly slow, but each step forward felt like a tentative brush with hope, a promise that one day she might find her voice amidst the rubble of her trauma. The therapy room was suffused with an almost palpable tension as Emily entered for her weekly session. The soft glow of the lamps and the gentle hum of the air conditioner seemed to create an almost surreal calm, contrasting sharply with the storm brewing inside Emily. Today, the shadows of her silence felt heavier than ever, pressing down on her chest as she prepared for the session. Dr. Adodo greeted Emily with her usual calm demeanor, guiding her gently into the space. Emily, her eyes still filled with the haunted shadows of past events, took a deep breath. For weeks, the memory of that night with Mr. Uche had loomed like a dark specter over her. The emotions connected to it were tangled and suffocating, but something in the way Dr. Adodo's eyes held a gentle, unwavering support gave Emily a sliver of courage. In an almost imperceptible shift, Emily began to speak. Her voice trembled as she described the events of that night. The words were choked and fragmented, but they came. Each sentence felt like a battle, with Emily's eyes filling with tears as she relived the terror and confusion of that evening. The room seemed to close in on her, yet the act of sharing felt like she was slowly unraveling a knot that had bound her for so long. Dr. Adodo listened intently, her presence a steady anchor. She acknowledged Emily's bravery and reassured her that the process of healing was gradual. There was no rush, only the promise of support and time. When Emily's parents were finally briefed about the details, their reactions were a whirlwind of emotions. The revelation left them deeply shaken. They were enveloped in a tumult of protective instinct and sorrow for their daughter. The gravity of Emily's ordeal ignited in them a fierce determination to support her through this ordeal. Together with Dr. Adodo, they embarked on a new chapter of healing. They attended workshops and read extensively about trauma recovery, all in an effort to better understand and support Emily's journey. It was a beginning marked by profound emotional turmoil but also by a renewed sense of purpose. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope that healing was within reach. The decision to confront Mr. Uche was not made lightly. Emily's parents, guided by Dr. Adodo's unwavering support, gathered the courage to approach the authorities. The weight of the choice felt monumental, like standing on the edge of a precipice, knowing that one push could change everything. Emily's father, a man usually brimming with confidence, now seemed pale and unsettled. Her mother's eyes were red-rimmed from sleepless nights, reflecting the sleepless worry they both carried. The night before the report, Emily lay in bed, her mind a tumult of fear and determination. She knew that revealing the truth would expose her to scrutiny and judgment. Every creak of the house seemed amplified, every shadow a harbinger of what was to come. Her heart raced as she imagined the community's reaction, the whispers, the stares, the questions that would invade her once quiet life. The following morning, the news broke. The story hit the airwaves and newspapers with the force of a tidal wave. The community's reaction was explosive and polarized. Some residents rallied in support of Emily, their voices rising in solidarity. They spoke of justice, of protecting the vulnerable, and of the bravery it took to come forward. Yet, just as many voices emerged in doubt. Skeptics questioned Emily's motives, suggesting that the accusation was a cry for attention or a misunderstanding. The tension was palpable as conflicting opinions clashed. Social media buzzed with heated debates, and Emily felt trapped in the eye of the storm. At school, Emily's once familiar corridors seemed alien. Her classmates' eyes were heavy with curiosity and judgment. She could feel the weight of every glance, every hushed whisper, as if they were all measuring her worth, her truth. Emily's anxiety surged, her nights were haunted by nightmares of confrontation and rejection. Yet, amid the chaos, she found solace in the unwavering support of her parents and Dr. Adodo. They became her fortress, guiding her through the tumultuous waves of public opinion. The struggle to hold on to her sense of self amidst the scrutiny and skepticism became her new battle, one that tested her strength and resilience with every passing day.